And welcome to the live broadcast. All right, we are live on this fine Thursday. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching us live or you're watching the replay, I hope you enjoy this. Welcome. My name is Eric Wright. I'm the host of your Turbonomic Labs session today. The Turbonomic Labs is a way that we can really dig into some of the really sort of more technical capabilities that you and I and our peer group and all of our peer professionals that are in the tech community want to be able to explore. It's a rare treat to be able to spend time going through really stuff that's in my head that I have to work through and figure out, because as a blogger and as a tech evangelist, I've spent a lot of time figuring out exactly what matters to me. And generally, when that gets shared, you find out that there's many other folks that are out in the world that have that similar problem. So at Turbonomic, I'm lucky that I live my dream every day, and by doing so, part of it is I get to spend time sharing my learnings with you as the tech community. Every Tuesday, our Turbonomic Labs are what we call Turbo Tuesday. So we do deep dives into technical features and capabilities inside the Turbonomic platform. But Thursdays are Open Tech Thursdays. So we actually go into, I say open, meaning any technology, sometimes open source, sometimes, just using cloud, using whatever. But the goal is to really just purely share technology use cases that are interesting to me, other folks I've talked to in the industry, and hopefully that you can share. Of course, if you want to follow along with all of our previous episodes, you can go to the Turbonomic YouTube page. We store all of the replays there. So if you go to youtube.com/Turbonomic, that'll get you to all of the, if you just go into videos, we've got a playlist that's there. And if you want to follow me, I always get that wrong. There you go. Point down to the site. You can follow me. I'm on Twitter. It's at Disco Posse on Twitter. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. I always appreciate getting connected on LinkedIn. Just do a search for Eric Wright, Disco Posse. Trust me, there's only one. Today, we are going to, I believed it was appropriate to wear my Harry Potter Slytherin shirt here as we celebrate the dark arts of systems development. That's right. We're going to take a dive into the development world for the day. The goal today is we're going to do something neat. I'm going to stand up from the ground up a Jekyll static page. So it's a simple, Jekyll is a Ruby-based framework that we can use. And it's fun because for me, look, I like doing web development, but I also don't like having to build it from the ground up. However, Jekyll's a great framework where you can do some Ruby-based dynamic content. Plus, you can just use straight Markdown. So it's a fun language to learn, and it's a fun framework to work within. And everything we're going to do today is about number one, using Jekyll. So great little tool. However, where do you host it? So the second half of the use case is I'm going to actually deploy this using AWS Amplify. AWS Amplify is a really slick platform in which you can launch static pages and simple web apps. In fact, you can get much more complex apps. But the reason why you'd want to use Amplify is because effectively it does all of the work under the covers for you of setting up your infrastructure. You can actually set up TLS, or as we used to call it back in the old days, SSL. And by doing so, you can effectively do a full ground up SSL enabled. You have cloud front distribution, so you've got a CDN enabled, and you don't have to worry about doing all of the bits. And I know you're saying, okay, Eric, that's great, but what happens? How am I going to get charged for this? The challenge we have sometimes with abstracted services and packaged services, because we don't see what's going on, we worry about, is this going to, what's going to cost me per month? Well, the beauty part about AWS Amplify, reach out to your AWS friends if you want to find out the real specifics. But I like it because it only charges you when it delivers content. So you're effectively, it's kind of like serverless for your simple apps. And the other alternative a lot of people say is you can use GitHub Pages to host Jekyll, but then you've got to go and worry about setting up DNS. You've got to worry about setting up your SSL. You don't get CloudFront distribution. You have to, there's other ways you can do it. And plus, it's only if you're just using Jekyll and Markdown for GitHub pages. The advantage, you can use AWS Amplify for actually much more. But today, let's just go with the use case. So we're going to go through kind of a ground up process. The first thing I'm going to do is, you can see here on the screen, Jekyll also has a ton of free examples that are out there. And I actually blogged about this process on my own personal blog. So if you go to discoposse.com, you can just do a search for Jekyll and you'll actually see the step-by-step of what we're walking through. But I wanted to do it live because that's really where the fun is you can actually see the whole process. So when you read it in a blog, you usually look and say, yeah, that's neat. I don't know if I've got time. You got time because we're going to do this live right now. So if you actually go over to jekyllthemes.io, jekyllthemes.io is a place where in fact, I don't even know who hosts it, but it's a great place to go to find both free and there are commercial themes that are in there. So if you actually just go and you say browse themes on jekyllthemes.io, it asks you about different kinds of themes that you want. I'm actually going to choose documentation themes because much love for documentation, folks. And it is one of the most underrepresented parts of systems development. The last thing we do is write docs, and it's usually an afterthought in every sense. So we actually just whip over here, go to the docs theme. There's a couple of great different platforms that we used. So I'm going to show you a live working one, and we're going to build one from the ground up. The only reason why I'm doing that sort of Martha Stewart pre-baked oven transition is because it takes a little while for the TLS certificate to be enabled. So we'll start it, and then we'll see a live site. But let's just grab one. We'll grab something that's free and simple here. We've got, if you're a fan of dark mode, here, look at that. Just the docs. I like that. Just the docs. Simple. I like simple. Now you choose your theme, and you can take a look. You can actually watch a live demo. I'm just going to trust that this is good enough for what I need to do. So I'm going to go click on just the docs on GitHub. This takes me to the source GitHub repository. There's a couple of different ways that we can do this. So I'm going to go with the way I'm going to want this to be my site. So I need to either clone it and work 100% locally and then never sync it back up. You can also download the code if you wanted to. You could actually just pull down a zip and you could get all the code, and then you own it from that point forward. These are MIT licensed. It's effectively Creative Commons, so you can actually use it. It's nice if you can feed it back, but I'm actually going to fork the repo. So by forking, it means that I'm going to get my own copy of the repository. So I'm going to I'll put it under my Disco Posse here because I've already got it connected up to Amplify. Easy peasy. Okay, so now what you see in the top left here, it says Disco Posse, just the docs. It shows what the source fork is from. Now I'm going to take this. I'm going to actually clone the repo locally because I need to do a little bit of coding. I've got a few Jekyll websites. So I'm going to say git clone. I copied that one. Okay, so I'm going to go to just the docs. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code here because people like that. I use Sublime a lot, but I wanted to try and do as much free as I can get here. Okay, oops, different one here. Aha, that'd be code dot. Code dot means it opens up that folder. My bad, I was using an old instance. Okay, so you see we're in the just the docs folder. The layout it's a pretty simple set of folders that you're going to get. You get includes, layouts, etc., etc. We've got a config YAML. So if you're a fan of YAML, which is probably kind of a weird phrase, but if you're a fan of YAML, like me, what you can do here is you can actually go in and we can set up what your URL is going to be. So actually, let's scale transformation.com. Base URL is going to be the root. So there is no base URL. It's pretty easy. You've got the other thing is you've got a git ignore, which is already configured. One thing I do like to add, because I'm using a Mac, is make sure you add your DS store. This is the image, like it does a little like preview images, and it'll, if you suddenly go into GitHub, you'll see it show up there. So literally I just made like 2 simple changes. There's probably much more that can be done. The site may not even work 100%, but it's just for the purposes of the demo. So we say git status. We see we've got a couple of files that are changed. So I'm going to do git add dot git ignore. You have to actually explicitly say dot git ignore. So you can say git status, and you'll see it's actually been added. Git add star for everything else. Git commit -m update config and git ignore. You can write whatever you want in there now that we've done that. So I've got that, and I'm going to do a git push. So I'm going to push back the repository. Let's go back to, it'll take a second. Okay, I do a refresh here. So I show I'm 1 commit ahead. So I'm now working in my live fork of this repository. Okay, let's stand up the website. So if you go to your AWS console, I've already gone into the Amplify service. So this is the default landing page. What you can do is you can like walk through. So we can say develop or deploy. We're going to go to deploy. You choose whatever your source repository. In this case, we already know that I've chosen GitHub. The first time you do this, it'll authenticate you and connect your key with GitHub. So you'll get an OAuth key, and that will mean that from that point forward, you can automatically browse your set of authorized repositories. There's other examples. We can dig into that in a few minutes if we want to, but let's just stick to the use case to start with. Okay, so we've forked. We're going to code. We've coded. Now let's connect the dots here. So I'm going to say GitHub. It's doing a refresh, so it's going to take a second. And if you create a new one, it'll actually go find it. Alrighty, so if you zoom in, what you see is there's a bunch of stuff in there, and it's already identified which are capable to be run as sites. So it's detecting HTML or Jekyll or different frameworks. You can do React and a couple other things as well. So I'm going to get my just the docs. You can select a branch. By default, I'm all about just stay to the root tree. So I'm going to just use master. There's this idea of a mono repo, but we don't need to get into that. So we're just going to go as it is. Okay, so the app name, we're going to call the app something we want. We'll just call it just the docs because it's just a sample. It gives you the build and test settings. This is what's sent when it creates a new container. Every time it does a deploy, it effectively creates a containerized web app, and it will use this. And you can actually go in, and I could modify some different files. I can do special configuration, but it just works out of the box, which is kind of cool. Same thing, build image. If you've got other things you wanted to include, then you can wrap your own container image and build it from your repository. We can assign some different environment variables. So we'll call it role production. I always like to do this one. And you can also talk about package updates. We're not going to worry about that again. So you can see it's automatically figured out that I'm using Jekyll, auto detected, nothing out of the ordinary. You could add it if you want. Let's just do a save and deploy. All righty. So now what's happening? It's actually going through and it's going to configure. It'll take a moment. It's going to pop up to the main screen, and then we'll see what it looks like. Now, what I like about AWS Amplify in this case is it's a very dynamic process. So you see in the window, now I'm in my Just the Docs app. What I've got is my front-end environment, and you can see here it's got this 4-part progression. So I'm actually now, it's provisioning the environment. It tells me when the last deployment date is. So every time I do an update, which is what we're going to do as well to a live working site, it will do a full update. And this is cool because all you have to do is push code to the repository, and it will automatically regenerate a new instance of the site, deploy it. It connects the CloudFront CDN. It flushes the cache out of the CDN for you. So you don't have to do all that heavy lifting that you normally do. And look, if you're a web developer and you're saying, Eric, this is way too much automation and stuff because we've got processes that do it. Probably not for you, right? However, there's other things. Oh, look at that. Perfect. I've actually got a failure. So it shows you what happens is there could actually be a problem because we've got maybe some bad code that I didn't configure right in the root. So there's a build error. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, so somewhere in the front end, it's going to complain. Couldn't find a compatible bundler. There was probably a version that was set. This is awesome. I love when things completely like tip over while you're using a live environment. So what you end up with now is it's detected a build failure. If I go back into my code, I would bet that somewhere in here, there's a specific setting in here for, it doesn't look like there's any special configurations. But tell you what, because you want to see it actually work, let's cheat. Let's cheat. And we're going to say, we're going to go back. Let's do another one. I'll grab a working repo that I know. This way you can actually see the build process. Okay, so we're going to grab this one. So same story. We're just going to grab another repository that I know actually works because I literally have a working copy of it. And this is the beauty part. You can do like 5 copies of the site. Each of them gets its own dynamic URL. You can set your own configuration. So you could have a test site. You could have a production site. So it's going to go, and now we're going to go through that same process. The only time that you pay for AWS Amplify is when you're building. So you pay for a thing it's called build minutes, and also in serving content in volume. So it's measured, I think it's like 1.4 cents per build minute. And then I think it's around 1.2 something cents for each gigabyte of content served. So you can imagine if you've just got a basic website, it's easy that you could outweigh the cost of dedicated hosting. Plus, I can connect it up with other things. The joy of AWS services is that there's all their adjacent services that we can leverage. So, okay, so what we're seeing here now, we're back to where we're in the process. We've provisioned, successful. It's going through the build process. You can see here, it's got a backend environment. You can actually add a secondary API service. You can add authentication. You can add additional analytics that will connect back to other AWS services. Again, this is all done using the AWS command line tool. So you've got an Amplify CLI. It tells you how to get it. Yes, you have to use npm. It's basically like a little node install. Okay, so it's going to keep going. Let's click around, take a look at a couple of other things. Under your general settings, it's going to tell you everything, of course, in AWS gets its own AWS and Amazon resource. So it's an ARN. It tells you when it's created, what the repositories are, what the branch URL is. And the cool thing is that you can actually have multiple branches. You could have multiple versions of the site. Domain management, by default, it will give you a amplifyapp.com, like some funky front end. The reason it does that is so that it can generate a working live example, and then you could actually use it for what they call the A name. So you can actually do a redirect. It's like a C name, but it's an A record. So it happens all behind the scenes. If you're using Route 53 for DNS, super easy. Build settings, this is the stuff we configured. You've got preview options. You can have it so that every time you do a pull request, you can do previews. You can set notifications, so it can be email, SNS. You can actually pipe it out to external stuff through an API. But let's go back. Okay. All right. Wow, that was fast. So it did the build, it did a deploy, and it verified so that it's actually live and working. Now, what I'm going to do is I've got, check this out. So I click on this handy dandy thing here. Oh, look at that. There you go. So I've got a live working site. And the example actually I had, if you go back to your Jekyll themes, just because you want to say like, I didn't make this up. This legit happened. I'm not faking it. We don't fake the funk here at Turonomic. Okay, so it's a help center. Looks familiar. Hey, there it is. Now this is neat because now what I've got is I've got this live working site I've got the code locally on my machine. And from that point forward now, I have a working site. Okay, so we've got build a simple site. Nothing really crazy. I haven't really shown you the Jekyll side of the world, but just assume like you can dig in, we can take a look at the code. Next piece, we've done a deploy. It sets up the URL automatically. That's great. But look, if you want to go to your friends and say, hey, check out my website, it's master.d3gbb092. No, of course not. You're not going to do that. So you want to configure this to actually have a domain name. And you're in luck because I happen to have a bunch of domain names that I can use as a sample. And the cool thing, if you actually go through, you can find all these in the left-hand panel for configuration, but it actually has like nifty wizards for setting this stuff up. So I'm going to say add a custom domain with a free SSL certificate. That's right, kids. Free. Free like free. Free as in beer. Free as in speech. Free as in source code. So the cool thing about this is it's going to actually configure this for you. I'm going to say add a domain. Now, the neat thing is it's connected, as you can imagine, quite easily to my Route 53 configuration. I said I was going to use scaletransformation.com, so let's use that one. So I've already got the domain set up. You can use an external domain. The difference is it will just give you the settings you have to configure. Then you go to your custom domain provider and you can configure it there. I've actually done that as well. Because one example is the DNS was hosted at GoDaddy. So they give you all the examples of how to do that. So my default is you want the root, of course. You've got to have your A, and it's going to do the C name. So your W, for those of us that still actually type in W. But I'm assuming you probably don't, but let's just do it anyways. You can add custom subdomains, etc. And they effectively will all point to, and you can see setup redirect automatically from the, you can set it to go to the W for you. Okay, so now we are starting the machine rolling. What happens when you actually configure TLS or SSL, as they're even call it here in the console? You're creating a certificate authority. Let's assume that it's going to be using Let's Encrypt behind the scenes or something like that. And here we go. We're actually seeing it's telling me the DNS record. So it says in order to verify domain ownership, configure this CNAME record. This actually will go away in a few seconds because I'm hosted on Route 53. So it's automatically going to go through this for me. So it would give you this. You go to your DNS provider. You set the CNAME record. And the reason you have to do that, of course, is because we're setting a domain name to point to a IP address. That IP address could be anything. It's not the domain name and the certificate don't care about the IP. It's DNS that does the translation. So by making sure that your TLS matches the root domain, you have configured that you can move the IP address all over the place. It won't matter. It's knowing that based on the CNAME that it's an authoritative connection. So that's how Let's Encrypt works and lots of other free services. Now, again, let's stop for a second and think about AWS. You have all of these services yourself. I could go to do the AWS Certificate Manager. I can create my own root level certificate. I could create my own subdomains. I could manage my DNS. Well, the problem is when I create my own certificate under ACM, I have to pay a monthly fee for hosting that certificate. It's not onerous. It's like $12 a month or something, but that's $12 a month. That's a couple of really tasty lattes. I'd rather spend that money on my tasty lattes or my other homemade coffee goodness than to set it up running another AWS service that I now have to maintain. This is completely dynamic, taken care of for you. So what it's going to do now is it's going to set up the TLS. It's going to add, you can go over, so let's go to Route 53 for a second. We're going to go to scaletransformation.com. And what you're seeing, okay, so all I had in here before was an SOA, so start of authority, and an NS record, so it points to the name servers for AWS. SOA, of course, is their host manager AWS, because that's where it is in Route 53. So it's automatically added the CNAME, which is how it's going to verify the certificate, and then it set up my CNAME for the redirect. and you can see it's set up CloudFront. So if I want to do this from scratch, I have to create a repository. I have to create a web server. And then on the web server, I have to upload the code to the web server. Then I have to set up a CloudFront distribution. Then I have to set up ACM. And every time I make a change to either the IP address or something, I have to make sure I'm reconnecting that the ACM is pointed right. I have to make sure the load balancer is configured. I have to set up EC2, or even if I wanted to set up something like a Lambda function and my own, there's a lot of care and feeding. So the alternative is I go to Amplify, I spin it up, connect the DNS, whammo. Connect the repository, whammo. Sounds pretty cool. Okay, let's go back. So it's in the process right now of domain activation, which means that it's going to go through, and this takes, as it says, up to 30 minutes. And that's because we've got to wait for caching of DNS to confirm. But like I said, we've got the Martha Stewart pre-baked oven. Let's whip on over, because I've actually got the same example that I did from end to end before. Now, what I've got is my front end. My configuration looks fairly similar. It's got its own ARN, a different repository because it's actually, or in this case, it was the same one. I've got my domain set, so it's already configured. I've got my build settings. I've got all the stuff ready to go. The advantage here is, of course, that it says, based on my domain, that I've already got it connected. So if I actually went turbonomicdevelopment.com, I've actually got my live site configured with the root URL. Well, I click on the little lock button there. It shows that I'm using an encryption. Sorry, that's a bit of an eye chart there. Lean in real close and you can see. So you can show the certificate. So it's verified. It's issued by Amazon. Life is good. And because it actually has all your root CA, it has all of the common name. And this is, again, you can set this up in ACM, but you have to set it up. I mean, some of it's wizard-based, but that's it. So now I've got fully stood up website, TLS enabled, Route 53 configured, Amplify live at Budokai. We are good. So we now know that we can do this whenever we want. So we've done this. We now have a fully secured TLS-enabled website that's built from code, from scratch, almost no configuration. But this is where the fun begins. What if I wanted to update the site? I'm actually going to update this code live, because that's the kind of guy that I am. Okay, let's close down that one because that was the wrong repository. Those other ones. So I'm going to say, okay. So what I've got is I've got my local code. It'll look frighteningly familiar, of course, because it's the same repository. So I'm going to open this up. The Turbonomic Developments Jekyll was the name of my repository. Similar setup. Like I said, there's includes, layouts. You'll get used to the site style for Jekyll, but I like it. They've got blog themes, other things. It's really fun for like web infrastructure as code or like web app as code. Especially if you're new, if you're in ops and you wanted to dabble a bit more with coding, this is a fantastic way to do it. I use Ruby myself for a lot of things, whether right or wrong. So it's just comfortable, more comfortable for me, I'd say, than maybe other languages. If you're into JavaScript, good luck. There's a lot of options out there. Like I said, you can run React, you can run other JavaScript front ends. But in this case here, so I've got, let's double check my repository. Okay, I've got no updates. Let's just go and make a simple change. In this case, I have my layouts. We've got a page here. So you can see that it's like a templating system, effectively, that it can use this stuff. So it's going to grab like stuff that's coming right out of the config YAML. It's got its own XML configuration for an RSS style feed. We've got default layout here. Okay, so let's find, okay, so it says head. Let's trying to grab a good spot. Header. Alrighty. All right, advice and answers from the team. So let's go back and see the before picture. Advice and answers from the Help Center team. Cool. Let's go back and make that change. From the offices of the Turbonomic Labs team. Okay. Now, you can see how it says site title. If I should go to my config.yaml, it's in there. So I could actually make this whatever I want. We'll call this Wicked Great Support. Okay, so I go out to my code. I do a git status. So I see I've got, let me just zoom in on that a little bit there. What I see is I see a couple of files need to be updated. So I'm going to say git add star, git commit -m. Look, I'm lazy, so if I do the asterisk, it's because I don't want to type in multiple files. Be careful. That's why I do a status first. Make sure I know what I'm committing. Updating title. Git push. Okay, now here's the fun part. We're going to race over, so hold on tight. We're going to do a change here. We're going to do a git push. So we do a git push. Let's go back over. Check this out. Now, live right before our eyes. Oh, look at that. There we go. Yeah, you notice it was green a second ago. So now what I'm seeing is we've got an update that's beginning. And it's going through the process. So it's doing provision. It's going to show me. So it's starting now. 11:31. There you go. We're doing it live. It's going to go through the build phase. So it's going to redeploy in behind the scenes a copy of the installation. It's going to generate a new container. It's going to run the build process to make sure it always wants to build first before it actually does the configuration. That's why there's a deploy and verify stage. It makes sure that you've got all of the steps in place. So if the whole thing goes sideways, then you're not going to wipe out your site to begin with. But that's it. Literally, I've committed code and it's going to start working. And you can see it's called build 2. It captures the commit message, so it's going to take a second. And as it goes through, it's going to actually, oops, there we go. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to whip back over here, and we're going to check on our other site. Now, remember, we were waiting for the TLS, so it's going to go through. Let's check domain management. Oops, I'm in the wrong one. Okay, there we go. I had the same copy. Okay, there we go. Look at that. It doesn't take long, as you can see. Now, we've done provision, we've done build, it's done deploy, it's doing the verify. It shows the last commit. It's pulling from master. It shows me my update. If I go back, let's actually go to my repo to make sure that it's honest. Sorry, you got to see my face a lot in this stuff. Okay, it's actually rolled right up the top. So you're seeing that's the actual the GitHub build. I go here. There we go. So it's showing me what the build is. It shows me the commit message, which is updating title. You can actually just dig right out and you can point to the exact build, which is kind of cool. So you could drill right in there. And let's go over here. So remember, let's zoom in, right? Advice and answers from the Help Center team. Let's do a refresh. Look at that. From the offices of the Turbonomic Labs, a wicked great support team. Cheers. We did it. Okay. Congratulations, team. You have now deployed a Jekyll-based web application. You've configured your own repository. You've configured your code. You've updated the code. You've configured TLS automatically for free. You're going to be paying only for build minutes. So in total, this probably cost me about 17 cents. And as long as I don't build all the time, we're actually pretty limited on the spend there. It's a Jekyll site, not a lot of high throughput. So even if I were to sit here and refresh on this page over and over again at literally pennies a gigabyte, it's pretty easy to imagine that this is a successful way for you to run your, Jekyll-based blog or Jekyll-based portfolio page, wherever you want. You've set the domain, you've set TLS, and you've been able to update. You automatically update the CDN, so you're getting rapid worldwide CDN through CloudFront, and you also get to experiment. So this is it. I would love to hear feedback, and big thanks to the folks that are pushing comments through. So shout out to Peter. I see Mr. Bali online as well, and a few other folks. Make sure that you try this out. So you can go to GitHub, go to jekyllthemes.io. You can grab your own theme and whatever you want it to be. You can go. You've got a lot of capability to be flexible. So again, let's just, in this case was Help Center. I've done a portfolio theme. So if I actually go, I'll show you just one that's actually not completed, but it's ericwright.ca, which is, I don't know why I did that, but it was more for the purpose of the example. It's hard to get Eric Wright for anything. That's why I'm Disco Posse. And now I could go through and I can create, this is a free theme, super easy to configure. I can do my stuff here. I'm updating it 100% through code, and it's automatically deployed for me. It's a secure site. I think that's pretty fantastic. So I hope that this is helpful for you. If you wanted to get started, it's going to cost you a few cents in order to configure this. If you're running Route 53, of course, like there's other, I'll say, sunk service costs that are participating in this. But if you've already got your own DNS, it's a good example where you can actually go through. It'll give you the CNAME record. You go to your DNS. It will configure. It takes about half an hour, 45 minutes for the DNS to update and flush out the cache. That connects the TLS for you. And once you're TLS enabled, then that's it. Because remember, we are supporting the idea of TLS everywhere or HTTPS everywhere. It's part of the, I think a lot of the global DNS providers and service providers, Google, I think, was the one that let it out because they want to make sure that it's just good for general verification, that you know that you're going to a place that's a verified owner and you've got secure channel in between. I don't think you should be firing your passport picture through these channels. However, technically you can. So don't store your passport pictures on a website. There you are. We have just deployed a TLS-enabled Jekyll website from code, from scratch, and we even took a lot of time to explain it, and it was done in just about half an hour. So I hope that this is valuable to you. Don't forget, we've got a wicked, extra cool special episode coming up on Tuesday. So this coming Tuesday, which is the... Go through my calendar, see how fast I can get there. Alrighty, this Tuesday the 18th, we have got Turbo Tuesdays featuring my good friend Chris Parlett from Park My Cloud. We're going to say how to actually save wicked amounts of money and doing so by, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again? Really cool theme. The Park My Clouds team are fantastic. I'm a big fan of them. Of course, they're part of the Turbonomic family. Plus, Chris is just a wicked good person. So, as far as humans go, he's one I trust myself and my life with. He's a good fellow. We've presented at events together. So I look forward. Sadly, not a lot of in-person events going on. However, this is a good chance for us to share. And in fact, it's even better sometimes because you don't need to be there. So if I'm given what I would normally give as a reInvent presentation, which you're going to see, these kind of things continuously with Turbo Labs, everybody can get access to them and you can watch them on replay, freely available. So I hope that you enjoyed this. Please do reach out, drop in a comment, hit that like button, subscribe if you can. It's also helpful for us. If you're watching us on LinkedIn Live, hi, LinkedIn Live. If you're watching us on Periscope, big fan of the Twitter goodness. So say hello. And I look forward to seeing you at other Turbo Tuesdays and beyond. So go to turbonomic.com/labs and click on the office hours icon. You can see all the upcoming shows that are happening. And you can go to the YouTube page for Turbonomic. Go to youtube.com/Turbonomic, and you can get all of these episodes on replay, transcriptions, and everything. So my crazy Canadian accent doesn't need to be interpreted live. All right, folks, thanks very much. Have a great day. Enjoy your Thursday.